On to our next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together and welcome John on board. John is the head of Enterprises Global Business Development at edX and a government practice. He is a global business development specialist, senior sales executive, and a marketing leader with over 20 plus years of experience in selling technology, digital products, and complex brand. Having a strong connection and understanding of APAC and Middle East market, ladies and gentlemen, having built multiple businesses there from inception. Most recently, John was a board member of Chief Strategist at Hudson and Cutler, a technology-driven marketing and communication company. John is a graduate from Harvard and William Smith College. Let's go ahead and welcome John on board.
Thank you, and good morning from upstate New York. I'm about 90 miles north of New York City, and good afternoon to everybody in the region and across the world. Obviously, like the other speakers, I'm incredibly disappointed I can't be in Doha in person. I've been there many times. In fact, in my former life, had an office in Doha, and hopefully this too shall pass, and by next year we can all be together again. So before I talk about the future of work and learning in a post-COVID world, just kind of a personal reflection. Before I came to edX, I was in experiential marketing, so designing and producing high-profile events for governments and enterprises around the world. And when we sold the company in 2012, I was really doing a lot of soul searching and trying to figure out, how to give back. And while I looked into a variety of things, I have 3 young children under the age of 14. And education, just seemed something that was so comfortable and kind of hit home. And if you think about at least universities in the region and in the US and in Europe, a typical university, at least here, is about $50,000 US. I would have had 2 children in college at the same time, so circa $100,000 US, meaning I'd have to make almost $200,000 US. And I started to realize that the system could be vastly improved. And I found edX. And for those of you that don't know edX, edX is a not-for-profit, fully online digital platform that was founded and funded by both MIT and Harvard back in 2012. And they had a very simple mission. It was to create the best content through the best use of technology to achieve the best learning outcomes. But their other feeling, and this is what really spoke to me, and still to this day, especially in this hopefully post-COVID world, is the fact that they felt that top content from top institutions should be a right to any learner anywhere in the world. And so if you fast forward to today, platforms like edX, we have over 37 million learners on the platform, taking 3,000 courses, and we have about 160 now content providers. So these are some of the top universities in the world, including in Doha, our first university from the region, the Hamad bin Khalifa University, providing content to anybody that has internet access for free. So COVID was a real, inflection point for all of us in learning, right? 30 million unemployed people in the US. The whole world essentially shut down in less than 3 weeks. Could anybody on this call or in this conference or ever would have imagined that the whole world so rapidly would have to switch to online learning? We certainly didn't see it, but it was an inflection, for online learning, and kind of everything that we had been evangelizing for so many years about the time efficiency, the cost effectiveness, the learning efficacy, all came into play. And many of us on this call that work for different kinds of learning digital platforms were able to jump right in and help those 300 million people worldwide, and give them the opportunity to continue their life in what was a very unsettling time. I mean, if you think about those first 3 weeks in March back in 2020, we saw tenfold increase in people coming onto the site. So in less than 3 months, more people came onto our site and other sites around the world than the combined amount of learners in all of 2019. So again, it was an unprecedented event whereby those of us that were looking into the future, that were looking into providing hundreds of millions of learners free access to the world's best content, now hit a turning point because everybody went online. And there was a lot of people who really suffered until they realized that there was a lot of us out there that could support them in this very important time and cause the least amount of disruption to their work life, to their personal life, to people in universities and schools. And so I think all of us in the learning community, kind of did our part. And I think there's some things that are worth highlighting. There was a huge demand for ventilators, and in some countries, as we're all aware, there's still a demand. We created how to use a ventilator for all those medical personnel around the world that were unfamiliar. We even came up with, courses, to build resilience and find happiness in tough times. And I think most importantly, for those that had never experienced the joys and the simplicity and the quality of online learning, we actually built our own course on how to learn online. So the other thing, as I mentioned before, is there were so many people scrambling and challenged in terms of, if you were in university, for example, how are you going to continue your studies? No university on the planet, including MIT and Harvard, had the capability or the time to take their in-classroom learning and convert it to online. So what we did, again, one of many online platforms, every university in the world could use edX courses in what we call the verified track to support and buttress the current curriculum in the school. So many schools used courses for different pieces of their learner population to make sure that those learners could continue their studies. And again, organizations like edX, being a nonprofit, we provided those for free, and it felt good. And I talked about my kind of personal transition from the for-profit world to the nonprofit world. I kind of feel the last 5 years led to this. When everybody was scrambling with this, terrible event that nobody could have possibly been prepared for, all of us in learning, no matter what aspect we were in, everybody jumped in. Everybody was supportive. Everybody did whatever they could to help, the next generation and the current generation of workers and non-workers get through this time. And I think, and we don't talk about this enough, it gave all of us purpose. Learning is the most important cornerstone of everybody's journey in life. And we all know that continuous process of lifelong learning, is never going to go away, given the advancements in technology. For companies, same thing. Any workforce, people that were out of work, we gave them the tools they needed in this, in this COVID world to get them to better jobs or to, progress in their current job. And it made us all, again, feel very strategic and purposeful in what we were all doing. Because again, and I think I've heard it in some of the other talks, nobody was fully prepared, for this. But yet many of us that had been talking about digital transformation and this kind of change in the way people will learn in the future, we were ready for these changes. There was no ramping up. The ability to scale to tens, if not hundreds of millions of people, were there. And I think there was a lot of interesting trends that we all saw. If I just do a quick overview, health and safety, humanities, computer science, we saw huge increase. No surprise with health and safety. It's what the world was thinking about, 38x from prior to March, 2020. So I think everybody who, has experienced online learning and has looked at their own position in the workplace or at university campus or college or government, it's a very changed world. And I would argue, maybe biasly, in some ways, it can be even better because of what's happened. Before COVID, almost all learning, for the most part, was in person. Obviously, by March 2020, we kind of flipped the switch. And I think now, again, because we were forced into this situation, because we were all remote, I think it's widely accepted, and we're certainly seeing this in enterprise and government, that we're going to be in some new normal, some blended learning. Most universities, most enterprises, including edX, we're experimenting in the summer with a hybrid model. Some people will come in, some people will stay at home. We're kind of working it out, but we realize that we were able to go from being fully in person to fully remote, and yet the amount of learners, was up 8-fold, and yet we were seamlessly able to handle that, as was many governments and many academic institutions around the world. So from our collective perspective, the new normal, and it's powerful, and it will have high degree of success and efficacy, will be some type of blended learning. And I think as time goes on, for those that are less comfortable or don't really understand how it will work and how it will be impactful, we'll see that you are going to get the benefits of both worlds. So, a lot of skill sets and what, HR people and things that learners are focused on, really changed during COVID, right? I mean, things that maybe weren't as important before became much more important now. And I thought, to make things interesting, when we started to do our research, look at the things that are currently trending, and these should have always be important, but certainly became more important when we collectively needed to think about the world in a different way. I think, if I look at this list, I think about flexibility. Everybody on the planet had to become flexible. We all had to become resilient. We were in survival mode. My 3 children are still online learning, and we're heading into June. It was a very difficult year for parents who had jobs and, had children that were used to being in a social environment. So that this whole idea of, being a coach, I was my children's, learner coach, maybe not the best person, but there were no options. So a lot of skill sets that are emerging now are ones that would have benefited us without the pandemic, but now are being worked into university teachings, into governments, into enterprise, because it makes a person more well-rounded. So again, there were a lot of initiatives by all of us in this conference, and this was really a time for reflection and for give back. We created the scholarship fund, again, for people that were truly in need, in addition to what we were giving out. And it was so amazing in the first day to, get over 15,000 applications. My talk today is really about, positivity. There was a lot of difficult things that happened in the last year, but luckily for those in lifelong learning, it gave us an opportunity again, and I know I'm repetitive, in terms of helping, and there was so many different groups of people affected. So again, for me and my team and edX as a whole, it was jump in, roll up your sleeves, do what we can as quickly as we can, so to create the least amount of disruption, in a learner's life. And, the key takeaways are things are working. We're all seeing that. I don't think anybody wants to go back to exactly the way it was from a learning perspective before. Almost 60% of people that we had surveyed during this said that, they want to seek additional education. People want to enhance their job status. There's so many more people that realize that by being part of this digital revolution and having accessibility to online courses will accelerate their growth, no matter what sphere or time they are in their life. And I think when we look, at governments and enterprises, and we look at the rapid pace of technology, this was the time to make that switch into online learning. I mean, almost 74% of CEOs, are concerned with availability of skills. So much so that many of the degree programs that are offered on platforms like ours are now being accepted in lieu of even a college degree. Not that the college degree isn't valuable, because I've taken a lot of criticism in the past, but organizations and governments are desperate for employees that come into the workplace with certain skills that make them job ready, and the online platforms prepare them. And many, many people during COVID took advantage of that. It's amazing what the pandemic as a catalyst really did. Back in 2017, when I was talking to chief learning officers and learning and development departments, over 3/4 were completely unfamiliar with what MOOCs were, massive open online courses. And in 2020, all of a sudden, there's 100 million learners around the world enrolled, and that just kept going up. And the amount of companies and governments that have full infrastructure and were able to train their people online has gone up, I don't even know how many X-fold. So we are seeing real change for the betterment of everyone anywhere in the world. You know, every organization now has kind of slightly shifted some of their priorities given this new skill set, you know, that people needed in a remote environment, you know, leadership and IoT, and of course the healthcare's, you know, there was a lot of very in-demand skills that platforms were trying to address, and that need, you know, will really only continue. And again, this idea of having credentials that are stackable, that you can acquire over time, became very important, because even if you don't get through a full 4-year degree online, you are given a skill set and tools that you can use to get a job and then take additional courses to complete your degree, you know, if that's your goal. I'm cognizant of time here, and I look like I'm about 20 minutes, and I wanted to leave time for question and answers, but the world has changed in a really positive way. We all struggled together as a learning community, but we're going to come out much better with all these vast resources, many of which are free, that will help learners, you know, strive for and be able to attain goals that maybe they hadn't even considered. And so I am very appreciative that you've given me the opportunity for these last 20 minutes, you know, to talk about what the world will look like in the future. And I'm happy to take questions. Okay, I'm gonna have to put on the glasses for this. So one of the questions I see is current challenges in developing countries when it comes to sharing top learning content. So that's an excellent question. Here's what I can tell you. In many countries, like Africa, for example, what governments are doing, because access is through, you know, Wi-Fi and the internet, they're setting up learning centers where students can go, or any learner can go and log on and get access to platforms, you know, like edX and other platforms out there. And we're seeing that in rapid numbers. Again, all you need is a Wi-Fi connection. It could be on your smartphone, your Android. Also, in terms of accessibility, many of the telecoms are allowing learners, if they go onto platforms like edX and other platforms, you know, very cheap bandwidth rates to help them. Let's see. You know, this is a good question. How can you motivate teachers and also learners to have an interactive teaching and learning process online, especially in time of pandemic? So, you know, because this is all still nascent, every university or enterprises, you know, teach differently. And I think the obvious motivation was that professor or that instructor at IBM that was teaching a course, they had a captive audience during the last 15 months. So, you know, anybody who's in the online learning space and could watch how courses changed in terms of animation or graphics that were used or video. I mean, I think it gave people incentive because that was the only way people could learn. So that idea initially of, hey, I'll pretend I'm in person and I'll just talk to the audience, I think professors and instructors and anybody who was teaching realized that that's not sustainable. People, you need to draw people in. and you also need to pick up, the way somebody thinks. I mean, perfect example. I know I might have lost half of you at about 12 minutes because I don't have video inserts, and I don't have enough time to, reconfigure your brain and draw you back. But in an online course, you have infinite ability to make that course as invigorating and stimulating and thought-provoking as you want. Let's see. So here's a question. There's a difference between corporate and campus learning and university campus learning. How can one envision a similarity in the new normal for both? I think the similarity is that it's still an online version. I think the differences are, in terms of what you're trying to teach. If you're giving somebody a competency, it's obviously a much more in-depth process. If we think about the world that is going to need to be upwards of 70% of the world's jobs, those learners will need to be reskilled. The only way you're going to do that is online, because these are self-paced course competency programs, and it gives you the ability to work as well as learn and be able to transition. So there is no one size fits all. People that are in academia and that are at university, it's a different type of learning than if you're in government and you need, say, a refresher in leadership or Excel or, digital, data analytics. So again, just like in any form of teaching, it's very contingent upon the audience you're teaching and what you need to teach them. I think that's most of the questions. I'm always happy if anybody wants to reach out to, discuss these things further, but I think we're in a good place. I think all of us that are speaking, have been able to make a lot of positive outcomes in this difficult time. And I think our future from a learning perspective is extremely bright, because there's so many new opportunities to learn online, from the best providers in the world, both free and in the verified track where you receive the certificate. These aren't choices that you had 15 years ago. And the fact that it is accessible to almost everybody in the world is what's really going to make the difference. So again, thank you all very much. And I hope to have the opportunity next year to get together in person. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing the insights. I am sure everybody is delighted to have you, and the insights are going to be helpful on a longer run. Thank you so much once again for being with us.